Okay, so my life. Okay, so live. Yeah, so we are live, and so I think we'll just give a little time for people to join up because as of now it looks like everybody is still taking their sweet time. So let's give them a few minutes to join up,
Yeah,
and
no
as soon as
worries.
they join up, we'll just get started. Okay, so we have people. So hi everybody. It's Angel again, Angel Opoku, and we're bringing back Design Week with the same plans we've always had. So we did this last year, and we're bringing this back this year again because we care, really. Basically, that's just it. We care. We just want to be able to help people learn design. We want to see people grow, and we want to actually see people get the jobs that no, because I mean, design pays well. So I know a lot of you are interested in design, and that's the entire point of all this. We just want to help you learn. And so today we have Amy Rogers. She's a UX researcher and she's a UX designer. And she's somebody I have disturbed a lot, honestly. So a lot of the times I just chat her up. I have questions, I have confusions, and I just reach out to her. And every single time she has come through for me, honestly. In fact, one of the jobs I got and we practiced some of the questions and stuff. She helped me out with a couple of things. I would always run ideas by her, and she would always come through for me. And so we have her today, and she and I will be discussing brainstorming for designers. Now, this is not something that comes up a lot. Honestly, I learned brainstorming from her. I'm not gonna lie about that one. I did. It was one of those days where I disturbed her so much, and then she taught me brainstorming. So um, from our conversation, I realized that especially for self-taught designers, and a lot of us just more or less just found our way in design. These are things that you don't learn. These are things that, especially if you don't have like a mentor or a senior designer that you could actually understudy. These are things that do not come up. These are things you don't just get to learn, right? So the idea is she's here. She'll teach us how to brainstorm and how important it is for us to do so. So, Amy, it's all yours. So I think I'll start by asking what exactly brainstorming is.
Yeah, so I guess in the context of what we've spoken about before, brainstorming is it's exploring the problem a little bit more. Like as designers, we want to push straight into the solution. We're like, oh, I know what's going to be helpful here. Here's an interface. Here's how it works. But like you said, it's not really taught to step back and actually think and explore the problem a lot more. So we had a conversation, oh gosh, it was a while ago now, but it was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was around brainstorming, right? It was thinking, okay, what situation is this thing going to be used in? Who's it for? Like, what are their motivations? What's holding them back? It's, yeah, it's kind of a coverall term for just understanding your users, which sounds very like it's very much a buzzword or a buzz phrase, I guess. But yeah, it's super, super important. And it is something that at least I feel gets overlooked, just actually thinking about the problem a bit more rather than jumping straight into the solution.
Okay. So is research, like user research, part of the whole brainstorming thing, or is it just a whole standalone process that is different from all the research you get to do before you start to design?
I think yes, user research is understanding people. That's the whole point, right? Like it's doing research on your users. But it also as a designer, it's important to do. So it's not just something that you're the expert and oh, I've done this before, here's my perfect solution. Like it is a lot more about as a designer spending more time on the actual problem and understanding what it is that you're trying to solve. Because really, designing an interface isn't difficult at its core, right? Like we have patterns, we have design systems, we use existing rules set by our devices to come up with these interfaces. So that's the easy part. The difficult part is actually like what we're paid to do is to understand which patterns are the best to use and why. And that means researching the problem.
Okay. So what this means is that brainstorming is something you do before you start anything at all, right? It's not something you just do. It's not an afterthought kind of thing.
Every time you're asked to do something, it should always come up. So yeah, that's usually at the beginning. But then if you're partway through and you discover something new, you might need to go back and do some more research or some more brainstorming. Like maybe while you're designing something, someone comes to you and says, oh, I think it would be really good for it to do this. Then it's up to you to be like, okay, why? Like, how will it affect the rest of the design? So yeah, it's mostly at the beginning, but then, there's no rules as to you have to do it here. It's just if you're ever unsure about something or if you need some evidence for your decisions, that's when research comes in.
Okay. So is this, are there like best practices? Is there like a way to go about it? Because I mean, brainstorming sounds like a big word, honestly. And then how do I know I'm doing it right? How do I know I'm not doing something wrong? How, do you get what I mean? So how?
Yeah, there are best practices. There are user research methodologies, and I'm not going to go into those because they're easy to look up online. But then at the same time, it's in the same way that whenever you're looking something up, there isn't a set way of doing it. It's coming up with creative ways to answer the questions you have. So if, for example, you were trying to find out more about, think of an example, like primary school children, right? Like there are multiple creative ways of doing that. Like, so it's hard to ad lib. For example, you might know a teacher and you might ask if they can do some investigation on your behalf, or you might talk to them directly about their experiences, or you might have a younger sibling and you might want to, ask them. School kids is for example, right? But you get what I mean, of like there's no template that you can just slap on because your users are going to be, different, if that makes sense.
So at the end of the day, it all depends on the particular problem you're having and probably even the kind of team you have. Because I know that a lot of times, especially for us product designers, this is something I don't think is talked about enough. We talk about processes and then we forget that if you happen to be in a team where stakeholders or your team members don't understand what you have to do, half the things you have to do, most of the times you don't even get the opportunity to do them. So you can actually come out and say, hey, there's this cool thing brainstorming. Can you just wait, let's think about this solution? And everybody's like, can you just design and just give us something we can code and then move on? So how do you deal with such situations where you're trying to say, hey, let's step back, right? Let's take a look at this. Let's really understand what we are trying to do. Let's talk to people. Let's really think about what we are trying to do. And then every other person around you is like, nah, fam. How do you handle that?
Yeah, like this is a big one. So when we say brainstorming, a lot of people think that means, okay, so I have to organize a full-on survey, right? Like I have to spend days coming up with questions, reviewing the questions, then send it out to people, then get the results in and vet it. That's important, yes, but there are some situations where even just leaning on your previous research, or as a designer, perhaps going and doing competitive analysis, or just having a think about the larger problem on your own, like that's not something that takes a huge amount of time, but it's something that you can do every time. Like just spending half a day, maybe even just looking for patterns and, writing down all of your questions and going and answering those independently. It's not, I think people make out like it's a lot bigger of a thing than it is. Like, you've got your double diamond, right? That's like the boilerplate for a design process. People think that all of that stuff at the beginning needs to have a big investment in it, I guess. Is that the right word, investment? But yeah, anyway, they think that needs to have its own methodologies and its own structured, time-consuming ways of doing it. But there are little tricks that you can do to get around that. So it means that you've actually thought about what's going into your design, but it's not been, it's not taken up time, which is the thing that you will often get pushed back on, of like, no, we need this design now. We need it. Just do this. We just know what we want. But yeah, it's up to you to make that little pocket of time to do your own thinking.
So how do you handle like situations like that?
Yeah, and so it's, again, depends on the situation. But like I said, it's either going to be I will just carve out the day in my or carve out the time in my own estimates to do that independently, just muddle together whatever I can find, or it'll be it's gone from my brain. It'll be kind of like how we did our talk before, right? Rather than diving straight into the problem, I'll just sit for a little bit and think, okay, the kind of person we're designing for is this. We've designed this thing for them before, and we know that they behave in this way. So I can use those existing patterns to make something here that will work. It's all it's difficult to put advice and guidance in place for these kinds of things, because it very much is an intuition, right? Like it's something that as a designer, you get better at doing it with practice. I'm not sure if that's helpful or not, but.
Okay, so how about we try this, right? We come up with a problem, and then you show me how. You know how.
That's it. Yeah, that's a good way of doing it.
Say you had to design a product for music lovers who have a hard time finding very rare genres. So some genres are not very popular. I know pop is all over the place, and so how would you go about brainstorming for that sort of thing?
So you've got people who are people who are interested in a particular genre.
Love music. Yeah.
People who okay, so there you'd probably start to think about, okay, how do they currently find this thing out, right? Like what services are in place? How long does it take them? Like, what do they have to do? Are there any blockers? How are they currently doing it? Just exploring that a little bit more, because it's stuff that's already there. You can, as a designer researcher, you can emulate that. You could be like, okay, if I were someone who was looking for this, here's what I would do. And then you'd go on the internet, kind of just see what's out there. And then while you're doing that, kind of think and then also experience the pain points. So you'd say, okay, while I was trying to set up this account, I needed to enter my date of birth and I wasn't old enough to use the service. Or maybe you need to give an email, but then you've forgotten the password to your email account, so you can't open the verification. All these little typical problems, just be aware of them, map them out. There's those, and then there's also looking at the larger problems. So by that, I mean, if there's a service that exists, but it's really outdated, might be broken, you might not be able to find it easily. Like these are all little pain points that you can spot in the existing market. And then you can say, okay, so now that I know the problems, it's time to think about why they're problems. So like I said, if you can't access your old email account, maybe, maybe that not being able to do that is blocking you from accessing services. So if you want to help those people out, you'd create a service that doesn't rely on email. I'm going off a tangent here, but that's kind of the whole point of brainstorming, right? It's like just going down all these different avenues, exploring, and then coming back, right? So once you've explored a whole bunch of different problems in that way, then you can say, okay, so for these kinds of people, I've identified that they're having these problems for these reasons. So if I want to help them out, I should identify like how I can fix these particular problems. So that doesn't necessarily mean you going in and building a whole new app or you putting in a whole new fantastic feature on your product. It could just mean, oh, if I tweak my product in this particular way, then I will get the people who in the landscape are looking for this kind of thing. It feels kind of abstract, but yeah, do you see what I mean? Of like, before you even think about, okay, I'm going to design a service for people looking to get new music, you've got to think about, okay, why isn't there one already? Or if there are ones already, how can I make them better?
Okay, so basically what this means is that brainstorming in a nutshell is being able to explore all the potential problems around a problem. Yes, I know too many problems in one word, but yeah. So basically, you're presented with an idea. Okay, so let's use idea now. You're presented with an idea. Somebody says, oh, hey, Angel, I have this. I want to design an app that provides music. So what I'm supposed to do as a product designer is first to sit down and think about all the problems that surround an app that or surrounds being able to find music at all.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm smiling because now I get it. So rather, now I get something. So I think most of the time what we do is limit ourselves to one thing, which is somebody wants an app that provides music. But if you were to, I think the entire point of brainstorming, if I hear you correctly, is that rather than just think about the app, you think about all the problems, because it's very possible that you may be able to come up with a solution that is not an app, but still solves that problem. Yes?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's scary to be, it's scary to look at the problem and then say, oh, but, sorry, the door knocked, I got distracted. It's easy to look at a problem and then to say, oh, I'll make an app for this, but it's not necessarily what we want, right? And it is scary to have to tell someone no, but at the same time, it's better than wasting months of effort and building something that nobody's going to use.
So, if you're supposed to brainstorm around the problem, that means you're supposed to brainstorm around the solution. So it's one thing to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the problem is. So you're supposed to spend some more time trying to figure out what exactly the solution is. Yes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brainstorming in both parts of that, right? Like let me try and think of how to phrase this. So this is one problem I have with designing generally, is that it's very easy to just immediately hone in on one target, right? Whereas if you spend time in just crazy sketch, right, like just come up with a whole bunch of ideas and then narrow down from there. I don't know if I've framed that correctly, but yeah, like it's the same with coming up with the solution as it was when you were exploring the problem, right? Just letting your brain go absolutely mental and then shooting down the ideas until you found one that's like good enough, like, oh, this is okay, I'll run with this. Because then, yeah, oh, actually, that's another good point. It's not really relevant to the topic, but being okay with having an idea that's not the correct one, because that's the whole point of, just coming up with random quick ideas of brainstorming, right? Is not being too attached to your first idea or to an idea that you think is perfect, because it could, and it probably will, change.
Okay. I think I'm beginning to see why stakeholders do not like the idea of brainstorming. It looks like something that will take a lot of time. But I think in essence, what is expected or what brainstorming really seeks to do is to keep diving, right? So I think of this and I think about the 5 whys. So you keep asking questions, you keep researching, you keep looking out there, you keep allowing your brain to think about all the possible pain points, all the possible solutions, and all the possible ways that you could do that. So since there is not like a timeline per se, you could do it in 30 minutes or 40 minutes. Is there like maybe some extensive way to make sure that you get the best results from your brainstorming? So say you had a stakeholder that is, oh, hey, go do you. If you're going to take 2 years doing that, that's your problem. But we all just want a solution eventually, something that works. So say you had somebody that was willing to just let you, give you all the time you need, let you do what you can do. Is there like some way to make sure you maximize the whole thing in the brainstorming?
Yeah, it is a balance at the end of it, right? Like problems and solutions and all that kind of stuff generally is so wide, right? There is so much you could consider. And at the same time, we have a finite amount of time to get stuff done. You've got to understand that businesses will have their deadlines, or it could be that a developer will take a certain amount of time to build this thing. So you, as a designer, have to come up with something that they can get done too. So there's all sorts of other constraints around, am I creating the right solution? So it's about finding a balance between those two things. Like for me, I wouldn't expect to be given like a huge amount of time for this. And that's, that's fine. That's the compromise. That's how you work within a team to build things together. You don't want to be the bottleneck, right?
Yeah.
So in whatever limited amount of time you give yourself, you have to find as much as you can. It's difficult to define it exactly because it's difficult. It's different for every problem, right? But then you can say that you have a best guess, I think is a way of putting it. So you can say, okay, I'm relatively confident in this solution because I've taken the time to explore these particular things. And then I've also considered these things when designing the solution. You know, you might have cut out a couple of areas of exploration, but then you as a professional can say, okay, I've seen this thing done before, so vaguely I think this will probably work. But then that's why it's important to test your solutions as well, like, and be okay with the fact that it will iterate. You know, it's a balancing act. Like your time, like the time you need as a designer and the time everybody else in your team needs. That's all about balancing.
Aha. Okay. So let's talk about brainstorming with your team. So say you have a team that is very interested in brainstorming and everybody comes. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, so it's, from my experience in the past, it's super valuable to get people in at certain parts of the process. Again, results may vary, but if you have someone who's a developer focused in your brainstorming session, then they might be looking at things through that lens. They might be thinking, okay, well, this particular thing will take ages to code, whereas this one will be super quick to code. So I'm going to try and, you know, tunnel our vision towards that one. Or you might have someone who's concerned with getting the product released before a certain deadline. So again, they might try and, you know, lead your thinking towards stuff that can be built quickly. In the same way that as designers, it's just kind of inherent that you'd want stuff that's more user-friendly and looks better. Even if it compromises on something else, you might have that slight bias to be like, oh, I want it to look cool. I want it to work really well. So yeah, I think there's value in, for sure, there's value in having a large amount of people with a variety of different viewpoints in a brainstorming session like that. At least at that initial problem solving stage, that's great. And then when you get down to the solution stage as a designer, that's where your professional opinion or your professional input comes in. Is being able to kind of not put your blinders on, but kind of focus so that you can gather all of that stuff that's come in the brainstorming and then channel it into one solution. Like what was the phrase I've used before? It's like there's a big thunderstorm, right? And as a designer, you're the lightning rod that channels all of that energy into one point, you know, to get the maximal amount of input, but then still contain it into one thing. So to answer your original question of, you know, should you invite more people into brainstorming? Like, yeah, it's always good to hear multiple opinions, but you've got to be careful of like what kind of biases they come with.
Okay, so I know that's the tricky one typically. So how do you identify these biases and how do you handle these biases?
The way I would handle them, that's probably the easier question to answer, is to keep everybody's inputs in one collective space. So, for example, if you're in like a workshop, like have everybody put their inputs on Post-it notes and put them on a wall, or have it so that there's a collective ownership over those opinions, and then you can balance them all up. So the problem, I guess, with, say you invited someone who's quite senior into a workshop, like your CEO, naturally in that meeting, you're going to want to make them happier because they're your boss, right? They're the one giving you the paycheck. So it's like psychologically, you'll want to give their opinion a little bit more bias, even if it's not the best one. So as someone who's doing research, you have to try and keep that neutral perspective on these things. So yeah, I found that having those bits of evidence, those inputs in a neutral space is really helpful for that, you know, to stop people from, you know, trying to play favorites or yeah, trying to bias, you know what I mean? Like it's so tricky to do it in a neutral way. But yeah, I found that those techniques can help. Just keeping it in a space where everybody has ownership over it. And then you as a designer can in your own time filter it through without your own biases on it, hopefully.
Okay. So everyone who's tuned in, you can actually drop your questions, and then I'll just ask her your questions, and then we'll try to answer this while we at it. All right. So I think one of the biggest problems, honestly, I've come to find is the biases. And I know at some point someone said I always just, stood on something because um, obviously as a designer, a lot of times your decisions come from research and it also comes from intuition, years of practice. You've done this a lot of times, and sometimes you can almost just say this works or this doesn't work. And then especially when you're doing things like brainstorming with other people, what you find that happens is everybody has an opinion, right? And you're trying to filter it down, and then some people are saying, okay, you're not listening, or you're not, you don't care about our opinions, that sort of thing. So, how is there a way to handle that without having friction with your team members, because at the end of the day, these are people you're working with, these are people you're going to continue to work with, so you don't even want to create that whole friction between you, and then you want to have everybody agree with you that this is a great idea, or this is the best you could possibly do without hurting anybody's feelings. I mean, come on, we are not here to fight war. So
yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to how you frame, like when you get their opinions involved, is being very clear as to why their opinions are becoming involved. So if you're upfront about that with people, if you say at this point, I'm just kind of collecting everybody's thoughts, I'm not going to use these to do anything, then people, will just give their opinion, and then it's up to you what you do with that. Whereas if you phrase it in a way of like, oh yeah, help me design this thing, then it becomes combative, right? Then people would be like, oh yeah, I want my thing to go in the final design, so I'm gonna push really hard for my idea. Like, it's about, I think more than anything, it's about being like level-headed and neutral with a lot of these things, keeping it very like, being, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like being open to having people's opinions, but then being very clear of like, yeah, but at the end of the day, I'm the one designing this thing. I just need your help because I only have a certain perspective. I need lots of different people to tell me these things, but then I'm going to be the one designing it because I'm the designer on your team. That's my job. So sorry, could you like remind me of like the question, right? It's like avoiding bias, right?
How to handle team members when you're sure of, or when you think this is the best way to go about things, and every other person or that a particular person feels that's not working. So how to handle it without causing friction without between you and the said team member.
Yeah, I think what I said before then, is probably the best way of doing it, is just being very clear about why you're asking for their help and then what you're hoping to get out of it. Like, as well, kind of keeping that, not boundary, but you know what I mean, of saying, I'm your designer, I'm going to be the one designing this because it's my job and I'm good at it. But I recognize that as just, confidence, that's the other thing, right? But I also recognize that as a designer, I only have that perspective. So it would be good to hear from you what your experiences are, if you have any feedback for me, if there's anything I can consider whilst I'm designing. Like, it's not like it sets you above everybody else and my opinion's the best and you're gonna have to do what I say. But it's about just being communicative and just making it clear that that's what your relationship with them is going to be for that task. It's that you've been asked to do something and you need a bit of help. Not that help me design it, but help me to explore the problem a bit more.
Okay. I think this would really help, though it can be difficult because I have seen situations where even you're trying to say, hey, I'm the designer, I need your opinion, but still at the end of the day causes some kind of friction, but God will help us. So I think at this point I've checked and I don't think we have any questions. Or guys, please do not forget, if you have a question, just go ahead and ask. But while we are waiting for your comments, I think we're just going to try a little bit of brainstorming. It's not something I'm very good at myself. I heard it already. I learned it first. I learned it first from you. So let's just try it out so that for those who have not yet, or rather, so we can give a whole practical approach to how it really works and what it really looks like. And so you just show me problems and I'll try to explore. I hope I have good brains. So I should.
Yeah. Do you want me to find you a problem?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I can't remember what I typed before. Let's see. I should have bookmarked this ahead of time. Okay, let's try and think of one. So I can't remember if we've used this example before, but say, so there are tourists that come into your town for, let's just pretend that in your town it's like a tourist hotspot, and the council has said, okay, there's all these tourists that are coming into our town, and we're getting a lot of people coming into our information center complaining that they are lost, that like our road systems are really complicated, and they need help exploring, and we want you to make us something that will do that.
They need help exploring my town when they come in.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing I would have said if I was being very unserious about this is that they can just ask me. I'll show them around. I'm generous like that. I'm generous like that. But yeah, a solution. So I think the first thing I'll be asking is, why is it so complicated? Why is it hard, right? And then what are the barriers? What is standing between them and being able to explore? So are there language barriers? Are they cultural barriers? Are they? Yeah, I think language would probably be the one that will be the most important to me, because obviously if we can't communicate, I can't even talk to you. And then what are the top things they want to explore? Like, is there like a museum in town? Is there some sites that is very important that people love to go to? What ways could they actually get to such places? And how can we make what already exists easier? So say there's a museum and everybody wants to see this museum. How would they typically get there? Taxi, flight, bus, train, eagle's wings? What is it? How do we make that better? Okay, I've said the app, but I'm trying not to think about an app yet. I'm trying not to think about an app. So what else should I?
Do you want me to give you another one? Okay. No, not another problem, but like another thing you could consider here.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Is you can consider the people coming into the town. So you could say, okay, like how old are they? How much money do they have? Like how, like what kind of devices do they own? Like, do they even own devices? How did they get here? How are they, like, where are they staying? All those things about the people themselves, as well as the town, right?
Oh, okay. So, you see, this is why I like practicals. So in this particular situation, or rather, maybe in all situations, aside thinking about the circumstances around it, I should be able to think about the people themselves. So, like you said, how old are they? Are they married or single? Are they educated or not? What would they? It's so cool. Okay, so another problem.
Because there's as well, I suppose it's important to mention this. There are some things that are important to explore because it's relevant to the problem, right? Like, so for example, someone's age may affect the speed at which they pick up new information, or like how their previous experiences are biasing them. Maybe it feeds into how much money they have, all these things. But then there are some things about people that aren't necessarily useful to explore. So, for example, do they own any pets? Unless they've brought the pet with them, it's probably not going to be helpful. But then again, also, do they have any kids? Maybe more helpful if they're traveling with young children. Like, yeah, it's important when you're brainstorming as well. This is something I probably should have touched on earlier, is that there are some avenues that are interesting to explore, but they may not be helpful in the actual final solution.
Uh-huh. So how do you know such avenues? How do you know which is which? Is it just something that comes from experience, or is there like a general way, some kind of way that for somebody that hasn't done this before, they could easily just pick it up and figure it out quickly?
I think a lot of it does come down to experience. Which sadly, that's something you can't really speed up outside of just doing it. But then a lot of it also just comes down to common sense. So, for example, if you were designing someone, or if you were making a hat for someone, for example, you would know common sense wise, it's probably not interesting to know what their favorite flavor of crisp is. Like, they won't really affect like the kind of hat they want to wear necessarily. But you know what I mean? If like there are some things you can just filter out by knowing they're probably not going to be useful.
Okay, so let's try another problem. Let's see how that goes. I hope I do better this time.
You want another one?
Yeah.
Okay. Say you are, gosh. It's more complicated to come up with the problems than it is to explore them. Okay, so say you are someone who has. I'm trying not to do town. I'll do town again. Say you are someone who's just moved to a new town, and you're like you moved in. You have nothing. You have just like the clothes you brought in your suitcase, right? And you want to, the first month or so of living in a new place is kind of scary, and you want to figure out how to ease them into that, like ease them into their new home and their new town, etc.
Okay.
It's a big one.
I think yeah, it definitely is a big one. So I think I would want to know who they are. So by knowing who they are, I want to know how old they are, what they do, what they're interested in, right? And where they're coming from. So somebody that's coming from a big city is more likely to like or be interested in a certain kind of lifestyle. Somebody that's coming from a very small cities, I got that one right. And then somebody that's coming from a small city is more likely to like a certain kind of lifestyle. So I think as an individual, I'll be very interested in where they're coming from. That might give me a lot of insight into the kind of person they are, aside if they are single or married, their educational status, what the kind of job they do. Obviously, like people like us that work from home, probably if I moved into a new town, I'm probably not going to be very interested in exploring and knowing a lot of things. I'm going to be home all day anyway, so why bother, right? So, yeah, anything I should have added?
I guess another thing maybe is I can't remember if you mentioned this just now, but if it's like why they moved, that might be quite interesting to know. But then that also, I guess this is another thing to pick up, is that those kinds of motivators, it's like, it's good if you're trying to target a specific person. So if you're trying to create a solution for everybody who moved because they got a new partner and they want to expand into a bigger place, that solution that you come up with is going to be very different from someone who's moved up because they've just got out of a relationship and they need to like downgrade a little bit and like rebuild, so it's like there are benefits to exploring both of those, but then it's also you're going to have to narrow yourself down in one of those avenues, I guess, narrow your target users.
Okay. So I think at the end of the day, brainstorming is something that, one, is super important because you don't just want to jump into doing something that nobody would actually end up using at the end of the day. Two, would require a lot or a little thought depending on experience, how much time you have, and if your stakeholders are pretty interested in you doing all that stuff. And then brainstorming also it's not just about the problem. You should also brainstorm your solution. So take your time, think about your problem. Also take your time, think about your solution. And then it gets better with age. I mean, brainstorming gets better with age, obviously. Rather, it gets better with experience. So the more you do it, the better you get at it. And it actually requires a lot of thought. So, so okay, well, I think so. From everything you've said, what I'm taking is it would probably be important to remember um, the who, the what, the why, the when, and hey, this last one, and the
How,
how.
yeah. It
Yeah,
doesn't fit
so
the
I think,
pattern, right?
yeah, so I feel like if you just can figure these 5 things out, you probably figure out most things, and then what's left for you at that point is now to narrow down to uh, the exact problem you'd like to solve or the exact solution that you like to solve. So having
Yeah.
said this, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Main takeaway is
Yeah.
just that if you're ever faced with a problem, don't dive into the solution right away. Like, even if you're someone who's got years of experience and you think you know what the best thing is, it always pays off to have a little bit to just think about things, just before you even touch a pen and paper. Like, just think, just slow down, just actually chew through the problem a bit more.
Okay. That's
I think.
I think that's not something that a lot of us are used to, but yeah, I guess we'd have to learn to slow down a bit, take some time to really think about what you're trying to solve or the problem itself. So it's been 41 awesome minutes, and
I'm just reading in the I'm just reading in the
the
chat about
comments, right?
people. Yeah,
Yes.
just people talking about sorry, I've been skimming it, so feel free to correct me on this. It's about like trying to manage those relationships where there
Yeah.
might be conflict and different agendas coming in. It'd be good to fire a question back at you, actually, Angel. Like, what are your experiences with this, and is it something that you can relate to?
Okay.
Don't feel like you have to answer, but I just think it'd be
Okay.
quite interesting to know.
Okay, so the reason why I'm laughing is that I've actually been reading a lot of the comments, and this is something that I have experienced a lot of the time. In fact, some months ago, I had somebody come up to me and say, "Hey, you're too confident. You're not the only person that is a designer here.
Oh,
Some of us know some things about design. I used design at some point. I've actually dealt with a lot of these things, and I read through the comments, and I'm just going to say this, right? It's common. There are teams that you get to, and everybody seems to understand their place, and the developer knows, oh, yes, I may have some idea about how Figma works, but I am a developer. That is what I'm good at. That's what I've done for the last 5 years. Yes, I dabbled around Figma for 2 years or 2 weeks, but that does not make me an expert on the subject. That I read about design every once in a while does not make me an expert on the subject, because you definitely cannot compare your stumbling on design articles and design things here and there to somebody that does this thing every day of their lives. It's not the same thing. There's a lot of things you definitely pick up from something you do every day of your life, not something you dabble into every once in a while. As an individual, because I like to learn, I've actually tried my hands out on coding, and so, but I do not think that I have what it takes to come and be having some kind of arguments with developers. I mean, I typically would just keep quiet and stay in one corner. My own is very simple. Can you code it? Yes or no? If you can't, how do we solve that problem? If you can, Godspeed, right? So I think it's a very common problem. While you get lucky sometimes you get lucky in teams where they understand, they'll let you do you. A lot of the other times, you actually get, well, unlucky. And then you're in a team where everybody feels like they're expert designers. Nobody would actually let you have a say, and it causes friction. What I have done is, a lot of the times in such situations, to avoid, I just, relax and let everybody do them. One thing I found is that the results will always show. So if my idea was to do this way, and you decide to do it the very opposite way, oh well, this product is going to hit the market, and then we find out who was right and who was wrong. So say it hits the market and you actually find out that your problem, it happens 2 3 times, you would only be a crazy person to keep insisting on what you want every single time. I also know that it gets worse, much worse, when this is coming from your leaders, people that you have to be under. So it's much trickier because not only is this relationship important, your paycheck is probably important. And I mean, you're not trying to be hungry. You're trying to, at the end of the day, no matter how much you love design, no matter how much you love what you do and you want to solve problems, you still want to be able to eat because, I mean, if I was hungry, I wouldn't be here. So I get that it gets a whole lot trickier when you're dealing with your bosses, your direct manager or somebody above your direct manager, and it's like you against this person. I, read, I just read a comment from somebody. He says to reduce my mic. I know what that means. So he's talking about this kind of situations because I have worked with him before and we had something similar. So I know it gets trickier when you're dealing with people that are your fortunate. I will talk. I will talk. I must talk. I will talk. So I know it gets a whole lot trickier when you're dealing with people that are ahead of you. But like I said, at the end of the day, let the results play out. It's not a do or die affair, right? In the end, whether you like it or not, you both want the same things, which is a good product. You guys both want to be able to churn out something that people are going to use. Nobody wants to build something and have only their family and friends using their products. That's not the plan. The only difference is that the both of you are going about it the same way. So I would always say, let the results play out. It's also very possible that you guys would go to the market and you were very, very wrong. Absolutely wrong, right? That could happen. So I'd always just say, relax. You don't have to kill anybody here. It's not, you're not fighting. You guys, it's not a war, right? You're not Angel, someone's asking me a question. Okay, sorry, if you ask the question, please can you repeat your question so I can see it? There's a lot of comments and I probably skipped that. So it's not war. It's just both of you want the same results, but different ways of getting that result. That's all.
Yeah.
So just
teamwork.
Drink water and chill.
Yeah, that's it. Like, it's the thing of the hardest people to work with, I found, are the ones who kind of cling to being correct. It's like, no, it's okay to bend and break and then be part of the team. Because at the end of the day, right, or at least this is mindset that's helped me a lot, your value as a designer isn't in the quality of whatever design you make. Well, it is, obviously. But like, a lot of your value as a teammate comes from how much you help people get the thing forward, even if that means making compromises as a designer sometimes, or if it means having to hold back on this cool new thing and wait until the next release. Like, it's about just being a good teammate and listening and talking and coming up with things together, you know, rather than like, yeah, like I said before, I'm the designer, I'm going to design it for you. Like, that's my field. But at the same time, just listen, you know?
Exactly. You never know. Sometimes I think honestly, in my own experience, some of the best ideas came from, it wasn't me. I probably might have come up with something and somebody just built up. Somebody's listening. The developer is like, oh, okay. So I've had situations where I design something and then the developer is like, why did you do this? And I'm explaining. I'm like, oh, so this is the problem. And he's like, I think I know a shorter way, an easier way to actually solve this exact problem, right? And then he comes up with his solution and it's awesome.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
Exactly. So I honestly think that no one person is the custodian of knowledge. But like you said, break and bend. Sometimes I know that okay, so there's a question. I guess we'll just hold on for a bit while we. So someone says, sorry, Christian Kakulo says, since brainstorming involves a lot of thoughtfulness, how do you manage the process with time constraints in mind?
Time constraints in mind. So I guess it's like I said before, I've well, one, it takes practice, right? Like knowing which things are more fruitful to use your time for and which things are a waste of time. Like that just comes with experience. But then also, see, that's a really good question. So for me, it's like I will time box something. I will say, okay, you have 2 hours to explore this. And then if you go under time, that's cool. Like you just get that free time back. And if you go over it, then, you know, either you schedule another pocket of time for it or you just cut off your thinking, not cut off your thinking, but wind it in. It's like I said before, It's a compromise. So your team has a deadline to meet and you're like, oh, but I need time to explore the problem. Yes, you can explore it, but not fully. It's about giving yourself that little bracket of time. I don't know if that's answered the question. I feel like I just, how do you manage the process with time constraint? Yeah, like having a block of time, being flexible within that, but then, understanding that sometimes free thought takes a lot longer than you anticipated, and it's okay to just kind of cut that a bit shorter, revisit it if you need to. But yeah, it's all about just understanding your thinking and getting used to exploring in that way. It's a very washy answer, but
Okay. So I don't know if it's the same question. All right. So Christian Calculus, I hope we have answered your question. If any other person has more questions, please feel free. We have 10 more minutes and would like to take as many questions as possible. If you all don't have questions, we could just gist while we're at it or while we wait. Cool. So let me check to be sure I didn't miss any questions in mind. So this debate has really gone on here about teammates and how to handle them. It's great.
I think just on that topic of accounting for other people, it's like, yeah, there's only so much as you as an individual can do, right? Like you can't control how other people behave. And if you've got someone on your team who is like very controlling and very demanding and very like, oh no, you have to do it like this, then yeah, that sucks. And you can't really change them by trying to conflict with them. Like I found that a good way of working through that is to kind of listen to them and understand their point of view. Maybe, like I was saying before, give a little bit, like win some, it's rubbish to say like political credit, but you know what I mean? Of like, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, right? Like become their friend. Like stop trying to, try and win against them. It's not about that. You're both on the same team, like you said before, Angel. Like you both want to just make something really cool. You both just have different opinions on how to go about that. So trying to earn their trust and prove to them that you are someone that can get the job done by maybe showing them that you're working with them, that in the long run will make things a lot easier. Like you can't change them as a person, right? And if that kind of behavior doesn't work, like if you holding up the white flag doesn't do anything, then maybe it's, maybe it is them and it's time to look for another job. But no, it's a fruitless exercise to try and change other people, but you can change yourself and how you talk to people like that.
Okay. So I see another question here. Ezra David is saying, how do you deal with creative blocks?
Ooh, this is a really good one. So I think it's important to recognize as well that sometimes you can have a creative block that you can't get around, and it's important to not force it through. Like we are only humans. Our minds change a lot. Like our moods go up and down. Like you might be in a phase of your life where there's a lot of stressful things around you, which make you feel drained. So it's important to know when you feel like you can push through a creative block and when you can't. And when you know that you can't, that it's okay to just take a step back and recover. Like that's super important. But if you are going to push through it, I think I've always found that doing something completely different unlocks that. So if you're struggling with, I don't know, let's say you're designing an app interface, like a screen for an app, right? And you're like, oh, I have no idea how to do this. Like everything I'm coming up with looks garbage. Then maybe design like a website for some side project, even if it's fictional, like, work your creative brain in a different way. Maybe get into something like painting, something that's just completely different from digital design. Maybe start drawing something, maybe even, I don't know, bake a cake, like do something completely different. but that still requires a little bit of creativity and a bit of thinking in a different way. And then come back to the problem. And I've always found, well, not always, that's probably an overstatement, but like I've found that it does help, having done the exercise of stretching your brain creatively in a different direction makes it more able to think creatively in that original problem. Yeah, but that's just me.
Okay. So, David, I hope she answered your question. And then we have another one here. How do you handle clients who cannot clearly state what their expectations are and does not give you enough time to?
Yeah, so I've sometimes found that it's like people don't know what they want. It's not that they're, it's not that they're uncertain, I guess. It's that they don't, it is that they're uncertain. Don't know why I said that. But yeah, it could just be that they don't know what they don't know and they aren't sure. But if you show them something like your first guess, they will know that it's not right. People find it easier to talk about something if they have a frame of reference. So if you've got someone, for example, who's like, oh, I want a website. And then you're like, okay, what do you want on it? And they're like, I don't know. Or like, this is vaguely what it needs to look like, but I don't know what it needs to look like. Then you can take that, try and do a bit of thinking on their behalf, come up with a first iteration, like a first draft, and show it to them. Be like, okay, so this is what I think you might want. What do you think? And then either they will be like, oh yeah, it's really cool, I love it. Or they will say, oh, that's not what I had in mind. Here's exactly what I was thinking of. This needs to go here, this needs to go here. And suddenly they'll know. But sometimes you just need that thing to jump off of. But that's true in a lot of stuff. Like you'll find that you don't know exactly what you want, but you kind of vaguely have an idea. And then as soon as you see something, you'll either be like, yeah, that's it, or no, it's not. It's about communication and just understanding what they're trying to solve.
All right, so we have another question. Okay, so we have 3 more minutes to go, and that will be our last question before we go. So
we'll go through them.
Precious, I'm sorry. We will take a question tomorrow, please. Precious Chuka Ono, post this up tomorrow, and we'll take your question tomorrow. So we have one more question before we call it a day. So Rosemary asks, have you ever tried shorter design sprints instead of 8 hours a day to short it to 2 hours a day?
Goodness. I think I'm going to assume you're talking about like the design sprint, like the 5-day Google one. That is a very good framework for certain things, but then at other times, changing the timings of that can make sense. So I've done one before where instead of doing it over 5 days, we did it in 2, just because we already knew a lot of the things we were looking to achieve. And then we did quite a bit of the designing and prototyping outside of the sprint. But yeah, 2 hours a day. I guess my question would be, what would you be trying to do in that time? Like, I'm sure if you were very clear about which things you were looking for and how you were going to solve them, maybe you could do it in 2 hours a day. But then also it's like, yeah, that's very short amount of time. But like by that, I mean, from going from problem to a tested prototype, that's quite rapid. But it's not something I've done personally, but maybe it's possible. I'm not sure.
Okay. So we have, okay, let's try. Okay, so Precious, we're going to take your question and then, what's that? Okay, so Precious Chuka Ono says, can there be some kind of objective standard or assessment of design, even amongst designers, without the involvement of the user base?
Yeah, I mean, we have things like design systems and design languages. So, for example, Google's material design is kind of like a mini rule book for how things should be designed using Google's language. So you'll see it a lot on Android devices and on certain websites and things like that. Like you'll see it on YouTube probably. So there are like rules that as a designer you can turn to and be like, okay, this is probably safe if we just go with this. But then at the same time, it's like Angel was saying before, you will find that you'll put something out and maybe it's just completely wrong, or it's not behaving how you wanted it to. So you're always going to have to involve users, and it's less expensive to do that in the stage before you've already built it and shipped it than it is to do it later. So I think there are standards that designers use, but then it's also super important to still involve the user voice. And the earlier you do that and the more frequently you do that, the cheaper it's going to be, or like the fewer problems you're going to make yourself down the line.
Okay. So, Precious, I hope we've answered your question. And if we haven't, tomorrow is another day, and feel free to ask as many questions as you want. Ebere, I'm sorry, it's been 1 hour. It's already 1 hour. We're adding more time, so we'd have to go now because I mean I wouldn't want to keep Amy here longer than I have already. So I ask you questions tomorrow. So Amy, thank you so much. Right? I I say thanks a lot, and I'll still say it again. You've really, thank you so much. Thank you for today. Thank you for all the other times that I would disturb you. I'll enter your inbox and one question or the other. Thank you so much. So we're going to call this a day, and we'll see you guys tomorrow, same time, same place. Please join in, invite your friends, your family members. I mean, my family is here. I don't know why your family is not here. So invite your friends, invite your family, invite everybody that is interested in design to come and learn. So thank you so much. Bye, guys. Have a wonderful night, or wonderful, depending on your time zone.
Great,
Bye,
thanks.
everyone.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.